are in listen-only mode.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us for this webinar. My name is Maciej Józefowicz. I am a marketing development specialist at Datapolis, which is the organizer of this webinar, as well as chief of the webinar project here. With me today is Kay Wise, principal of the Wise Choice Consulting Company, and a person with a lifetime experience of process management and improvement, who will conduct this presentation. Now, the presentation should take about 30 minutes. Then we would have some 10 minutes for the Q&A session, and we'll be making a short survey then, so we should conclude the whole thing in about 45 minutes. This is the first of our webinars. We will have a second one on Thursday, tomorrow, at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. So if you know someone who would be interested in this topic, you can spread the message. Now, we will be certainly grateful for having anyone here. If you'd have some questions during the presentation, please write them in the chat box, and we will respond to them after the presentation. Now, Kay, the microphone is yours. Hello?
Thank you, Maciej. This webinar is on process improvement, something that I have been working on since, probably 1974, probably before a lot of you were born. Process improvement hasn't changed all that much. Like processes, they're based in human behavior. And the best thing that I have found in a lifetime for doing processes and keeping people involved is SharePoint. I've been using it since 2003, and it's a great way to pull people together and connect the click points. We will have three parts of the presentation. Part one is on process improvement, with a focus on improving a process. Part two is on building workflow. And part three is on managing throughput. Managing the process after it's improved puts it as part of a continuous process improvement. It's never one time. It's always doing a little bit each time to make the process better for all the participants. So we're going to focus on improving the process at this time. As I said before, SharePoint's a great place to store information and documents, but it can get complicated, especially if it's been going for a long time or has a lot of participants. Sometimes folks don't notice where to click or when to click. And processes can break down when someone doesn't click in the right place or at the right time to do his part of the job. Then the next person in line doesn't get the handoff. So a SharePoint workflow is the perfect way to connect the click points and help each person play his role in the process. As I was planning this talk, I was in the process of changing from one internet service provider to another. And it provided me an excellent illustration that I thought I would share with you. So this is a process improvement story with some elements of truth. The sales lady came to the door and promised us 10 times faster internet at no more cost, and we signed up. And then the problems started to occur. The company obviously has a lot of internal process issues. The billing came out double what I had anticipated. The install guy didn't show up when he was supposed to. There were just lots of troubles. So being a process improvement person, as probably a lot of you are, I see this as an insider's opportunity. an opportunity to be a hero. And if we wanted to be a hero, how would we go about it? Well, my suggestion would be to define the problem, then picture the process, then improve the picture, and then improve the process. So let's step through those. First, define the problem. Well, to do so, you have to open an investigation. We have to ask some questions. For example, why did the installer get the wrong date? Why did the bill expect the wrong amount? Go about, figure out what happened. Well, the wrong install date came because the install schedule was copied from the order before the order was changed. And the billing was wrong because the order was entered twice. It should have been entered once and then changed, but instead of that it was entered twice, and I got billed for both orders. Long story short, processing participants were in data silos. They were looking at different versions of the order. This is what SharePoint is designed to solve. Well, let's picture this process. I'm using a sketch of a data flow diagram. The diagramming method isn't important, but you can see kind of what happened. The customer was me, kind of outside the process. This boundary is a process boundary, and inside it are other sub-processes. So the customer gave the order details to the sales lady, and she telephoned in the order details to some clerk who entered the order into an order data store. This is a data store. Then we know that the install guy got dispatched from some kind of schedule, stored someplace, but not in the same place as the order. And we know that the invoice came back from some invoice process. So that's what we know, and we've pictured the process as we saw. Now, the process of process improvement, there's a huge literature on process improvement. In this case, what I generally do and what I would recommend is that you meet one-on-one with the process participants and watch as they do their work. This can be enormously revealing, especially if you're an IS or IT person who has done some development, and you make certain assumptions about your users. But to watch as they actually use their processes can bring you all kinds of insights. And during the process of watching, you can ask questions and solicit their support so that you can kind of begin to build a team, because process improvement is most definitely a team effort. And during the process and prior to making any changes, you want to measure as many things as you possibly can. You want to know about how many items are going through the process, how many are completed each hour or each day or week, depending on the process that you're actually working with. You want to know how regular is the flow. Is it like a restaurant, or is it just regular as it can possibly be? Which item takes the longest to complete the process? Find out, measure several items and their throughput. How long did the longest take? How long did the shortest take? Which sub-processes take the longest? And how long does an item wait in various states? These are some of the things that will help you to improve the process. In our case, we're going to now improve the picture. We had a problem with data silos, so we're going to add some data flows. We're going to add, from this enter order process, we're going to add some data flows to the customer and back. We're going to add a data flow from the order into the dispatch installer process. we're going to add some feedback from the install guy down into the schedule. And then we're going to add some data flow from the schedule that takes the feedback into the customer invoice process. And along the way, we are going to, by adding these data flows, break down the data silos. So far, we've now defined the problem, that the process participants were in data silos looking at different versions of the order. We pictured the process, and we've improved the picture. Now it's time to improve the process. So recommend go back and meet with the team that you built during the investigation. Share the before and after process pictures. It's very helpful to everyone. They don't have to be any kind of a process or a technology guru to understand the pictures and to understand the measurements. So share these with the team. Then I would suggest you write a charter to improve the process. This is what it takes to pull in the management into the process. A charter doesn't have to be a long, difficult document, but it needs to be written down. It writes your objectives. It writes down what resources will be involved in doing the process improvement. And it writes some goals of how you want to improve this process. And you get it to be signed off on so that everybody's on the same page and we don't have as many misunderstandings. Everybody gets a copy of the charter and we all begin a little project to work on it. After that, we will build a workflow to implement the new data flows smoothly and then implement the process with the team. This is the second part of the webinar, and it will focus on building the solution, building the workflows. I love this picture because I think of a workflow as creating a robot butler, a little guy who's going to take each item from my work or another person's work and carry it to the next person until the job is completed. And so we're going to build 3 workflows. We're going to build one workflow that's highlighted here in yellow on the order entry process, on the order list. We're going to build a separate workflow on the install schedule and the install dispatch process, and a third workflow on the invoice and the invoicing process. And each workflow will need to have a certain type. There's various types of workflows. A list workflow is created on a single SharePoint list, and it creates a workflow instance that will run on every item in that list. A site workflow works on a content type that is on a single site. Now, a content type or a list is a group of fields, of data fields. It's a set of data that travels together. As you know, in a list, you may a list item could be an order, and the order could include the name and address of the person who made the order, and the service that they're ordering, and the install date. That's a set of data in a list. There can also be a set of data in a content type, and that data can be in multiple lists. The same content type can be in multiple lists on a single site. So that would take a site workflow. And you could have a content type that's on many different sites all across a site collection, and that would require a global workflow. Now, we've talked about several different workflows, but what we can do with each workflow is we can make it into an application. The application can run inside another workflow or inside several workflows. And a workflow can access outside data stores through an application. So our solution would be to define a list workflow on a SharePoint order list to take care of this part of the process. We would build a site workflow on the calendar content type to take care of this install scheduling process. And we would build an application that accesses an outside billing system to take care of the invoice process. As I have alluded to before, a single definition of a workflow can create or spawn many instances of that workflow. The workflow definition is a pattern of instructions, a program, if you will. It has versions, it has variables, and it's run by the Microsoft Workflow Engine. So there can be many ways to do a workflow definition. The workflow instance is a copy of the instructions that were created in the definition. And it rides along with each list item. In this case, it would ride along with each order. And it has data that's unique to that item or to that order. So it would have an install date that is unique to that particular order. And once it's launched, once the workflow instance is launched, it is not changed. You can change the workflow definition, but the particular instance that has been launched will not change. So while there are many ways to build a workflow, by far the easiest that I've ever found and the most fitting to a process is the data polis process system. We would open the data polis process system on the list tab of the orders list. So here's the list tab and here's the orders list. And up here we would see the icon for the data polis process system settings. You click that and you receive this page with a button to create a workflow. If you've already created one, as in this case, you could click on it and edit the definition of the workflow. When you click, you see what I call a blackboard, the particular graphical user interface for creating a workflow definition. Here's the tool set, here's the start, the green start button, and the red stop button. And you would drag this state icon onto the blackboard, and it would provide this type of a rectangle, rounded rectangle for the state. And then you would use this icon, which is the action icon, to connect one state to the next state. And so that that's how an item will move from one state to the next state, is through the action. I think of a state as a pile of paper. So here's the state, and here's the pile of paper, and the action, this little guy here, that's you or me or the process participant, takes an action by dispatching a robot with a single sheet of paper and telling him to take it to a new pile on somebody else's desk. That's the fun part about this. You can get him to take it to somebody else's desk. Now, activities are the robot's to-do list, and he has to do those things before he delivers. Here's a state action diagram that deals with the installer. So here's a state that's called install request and another state called verify with the installer. And there's an action here called take a date, kind of like take a number, except that you really want to have the installer verify that that works. So if necessary, the installer can send back and request a reschedule. Or if the install request needs to change the date, they can send over here and ask to release that date. After the installer does his work, he can finish the request. Now, you might be wondering why we are using two types of diagrams. Well, the data flow diagram, the sketch that we made, is a high-level, theoretical, universal type of process diagram. And it involves many data stores, and it helps us trace data movement. And it shows us really what needs to be done. But the state action diagram is transformative. It actually creates the program, the definition of the workflow. And this particular diagram is unique to Datapolis. It runs on one list or one library or one content type, but it can read and write to others. It defines the actions that are done by a person and the activities that are done by the system, and defines how the system works. Here's a sample workflow on the orders list. The initial action takes place when a clerk enters the order, and it goes into the new order state. At this point, the clerk has two options. Has one option. They can send it for the pre-install confirmation. This is to confirm with the customer what the order was. And this is to bring the customer into that loop, add those new data flows that go with the customer. At the pre-install confirmation time, probably the customer service person can request a modification in the order, in which case it would go back to an update order request and back into the new order box, the new order state. Or the pre-install confirmation could cancel the order, which would send it back here. This particular one, we might make it possible for them to cancel the order and have it go all the way to the finish. So these things can be changed, and this is part of the process improvement process. The other thing that the pre-install confirmation can do is they can send it to the waiting install state. And then after the install, it goes to a post-install confirmation, which is when they go back to the customer or check, or go back to the installer or whatever, and confirm that it's ready for billing. At this point, they may want to again request confirmation and update the order. So we could build a workflow for that order. We'd build a workflow for the pre-install contact and another for the post-install contact. In this particular order for post-install, you notice this little square thing here. This is a timer process, and one of the neat parts of something in a state is that you can set a timer, and the timer will go off and initiate an action or activities either at a particular date and time on the calendar or after a particular interval. Isn't that fun? Let's see if we can make it happen again. We go back and then package workflows as applications. Just package them up. We would package up a workflow as an application for each data store. So the install request we're going to put into this little blue box. And the install confirmation we're going to put in this little yellow box. And after we package an app, it will appear, we can make it appear in the upper right corner of the designer. And then we can use it in another workflow. So here you package it and it goes up there. And then you drag and drop it from the place up in the corner to a particular state. And here we're going to package the pre-install confirmation, the install date confirmation workflow, and add it to the pre-install confirmation state. And here is the workflow that initiates the invoice, and we're going to add it here. So far, we haven't made the most use of our workflows. They can be used for much more than just sending from one state to another. So we can define an action for each, an activity, a whole set of activities for each action. In our workflow, here there are 7 different action lines. You double click on any one of these and you can open an activities designer. First you'll get this dialog box, which you can design a launch form, permissions, conditions, appearance. Here you can click to add activities. And what will open is this drag and drop activities designer. So there are a number of pre-built activities. Here's one called send an email. You drag it over and over here and open it up and tell who you want this email to go to. Or you can set a variable. You could launch another workflow action. You could even start a workflow or do actually most anything. Activities designers, activities can be conditional based on if or various conditional states. They can go into containers. They can have a loop, so you can go through a whole set of orders doing the same thing. You can just do most anything with activities. Now let's focus on managing this process. We've got to implement it and we've got to manage it. Let's presume that it's built and we're going to take it the next step now. Well, the first thing we're going to do is decide who can do each of these steps and states. So we want to create roles. Most processes, formal processes in a business, require multiple departments to get involved. In this case, we have a sales team, and we're going to give the sales team the role of monitoring new orders and modifying orders, entering new orders and modifying existing orders. We're going to give this customer service team the role of doing the pre-install confirmation and the post-install confirmation. And we're going to give the installer, the team, the install state. And the way you can do that is just drag. First you create the install team icon over here. You just add a role. And then you click on that and you can put into that role. The role is a container. And you can put into that role any particular user or user group of SharePoint. And then you drag that down onto the state or onto the action, and that makes it such that that team can perform those actions. So here we have the role of the sales team. And here's the role of the customer service team. Pre-install confirmation, requesting modifications, confirming the install date. So once implemented, each order has its own instance of the workflow, acting as a butler to courier the order from one user to another. I love this slide. I love how happy users are. Aren't your users always happy? Maybe we hear from them when they're not so happy. But most of the time I like to think of them as happy. And they might be even happier if they have their own little butler to come and take their work from one place to the next. So what does the user see in all of this? This is a list, this is a view on a list of a running existing order. It's a list that is running at one of my customer sites. And it has a workflow called attention to, and it has a state called RPA. And what the user sees when he does a right click on here or a click on this little arrow, down arrow, he sees two actions that he can perform on this item. He can do a finish, or he can send us for analysis. But this is how easy it is for the user. He can also find these actions on his ribbon. This is a view that shows how many are in each user's queue. So we have a user here who's called Nura, and she has 9 items in her attention to state, and they're in the new LMA state. So she has 9 items here sitting, waiting for her to work on them. I have, here's my name, Kay Wise. I have 11 items. 5 are in the Analyze Event state, which is up here. And 5 are finished, and one of them apparently doesn't show. I could look at the history of any of my items. This is a very simple little history that I made for this presentation, but it shows you what you can see in terms of workflow statistics. The workflow duration was 2 minutes and 44 seconds. And it stayed in one state. It stayed in the right item event state for the longest time was 2 minutes and 35 seconds. So, and here you can see an activities history. And there's an if statement there. And the result was false, and that caused this to finish. So that's how the kinds of statistics. But now, obviously, if you had a longer process and many more states and actions, you would have a lot more information in the history area. You can now measure the process a lot more easily. You can find out much more quickly how many items finish each hour, day, or week, how long the longest one took, how long the shortest one took, what sub-process is taking the longest. And with Datapolis Solutions Management, you can find out all the different packages, what you have deployed, what is deployed where. You can here see a list of deployed workflows and how many instances are running on each workflow. You can build custom reports and export them to the process manager so he can see what's happening, because this isn't something, process improvement is not something that IT can do or the process person can do alone. It needs to be a team effort and needs to be based on actual reality of what is happening. So you can share these reports. And you can even configure logging primarily for the administrator to know if something's going wrong, find out a little more about what is happening. You can manage these multiple processes from a single repository so that the sales team, the human resource team, the help desk, the accounting people, all can have their workflows managed from a single repository. You can export statistics from the administration area. You can do all kinds of management activities that help you to have continuous process improvement. Have we come up with some questions, Meiji?
Yes, Kay. Thank you for your presentation. It was great to hear them. Now questions. Yes, I believe that now we will have time for at least some of them. I have one here. Users have to click on items to see the available actions. Despite training, some users just don't notice items are in the wrong state and don't click to select another action. Any tips for ways to handle this? Well, yeah, that's a great question, Kay.
Yes, we're talking about the interface between the user and the process. And it is variable, of course, like all these processes. We had started out sending an email to each person. And if it's an erratic type of process, this works really well. Then they can click on the email and it takes them directly to the place where they can select the action that they want. That's very useful. On the other hand, if there are some people who will sit in and watch all day or check in once a day and deal with all their process items just like they deal with their email. So they would see what's in their state, in the state that they are managing. And sometimes we also have found that Datapolis created a wonderful process that if you have, say you have a dozen different orders, all that need to be sent to the next state, to the verify state. Well, and they're all in the new order state. So what you can do is go in and use a bulk action send, and you just click, you fill out a checkbox on each of these dozen orders, and you can in one action send them all to the next state.
Okay, and another question going on. Is there a room in an existing process to start a ad hoc process?
Pardon?
Is there a room in an existing process to start a ad hoc process?
There's an action, an activity, so you can start another workflow. I'm not quite sure what they mean by an ad hoc process, but you can, part of a process is, part of the process definition, the workflow definition, is that you figure out ahead of time what are the possible things that your users or process participants need to do. But you can, in fact, have a define an activity that would, for example, pull up a email. They could enter as a field, they could enter their email message, and that could be sent to a person that they choose. There's we would have to figure out what about the process is regular, such as sending an email, and what is ad hoc, what are the variables. And then we could certainly design something. Do we have another question? Hello? Do we have another question?
Okay, yes, Kay, but I'm afraid we don't have any other question at the moment. If
okay.
If you now will have some later, you can send it. You can send it on my email, and now we will respond to them. And now one more small thing. To conclude it, I have a small survey. If you are interested in our solution and if you would like to know it in a greater details, now check the boxes and if you are interested in testing an online test site, or if you would be interested in modeling a custom process in a data police way. And if you do so, we will get back to you. Now you will have about 1 or 2 minutes to check it.
I appreciate your attendance, everyone, and I hope you will feel free to ask any more questions if you think of them later, or if you would like to have more information, please contact Datapolis or myself, and we'll be happy to answer them later.
Oh, and now one more question coming up. I think we could answer it. Do you have any examples of how this would work for an HR process? Any HR processes that could be covered by it?
Oh, any and all. It depends on all the HR processes are fitting beautifully into this kind of a scenario because it's a place where HR needs to contact all the different managers, and there are ways of, just like setting up our orders process, it could work in a similar way where you have to pull together and have sharing between the hiring managers, the interview persons, and a lot of different emails that have to go back and forth. But it's so hard to keep track to make sure that for any given person who applies and who is interviewed, that they also get a response. And from the HR point of view, it's hard to keep track of all of them, so that if they put in one list the name of each interview person and keep track of their data, in SharePoint you can have an attachment to a list item. So you could attach, for example, their curriculum vitae onto an applicant ordered list, and then you can send that to the hiring manager, and the hiring manager can have his little queue, so you can go in and see which ones that have gone to that particular hiring manager, and which ones he has sent and on, which ones he wants to do what with. I think it would be a perfect solution for HR.
Okay, we have another question. Does this workflow solution work on SharePoint Foundation? And I can answer this one. Yes, it works. You need in our SharePoint 2013, but it works both on SharePoint Foundation and SharePoint Server. And another question, is it possible for a supervisor to overrule the pending stage of a process and push it to the next stage and complete the skipped stage in a later time?
Certainly. You can, it depends on who you are, and the process participants, the rules that you make for permissions. But if you permit somebody to overrule it, you can actually stop the process on a particular item, and you can restart the process on a particular item. That's one level at which you can deal with it. Or you can put it in some kind of a waiting state.
All right, and I think the last question for now will be, how does this solution differ from a SharePoint Designer workflow? What is its main differentiator?
The workflow engine, Microsoft workflow engine, will run a workflow definition, whether that definition was created by Datapolis or whether that definition was created by Designer. From that standpoint, there is no difference. But what the Designer is much more difficult to work with. It doesn't have the built-in activities that we showed you. It doesn't have the Blackboard Designer. And personally, I just found it very difficult to use. It's not hard if all you want to do is to have a request that somebody signs off on. If it's a 1 or 2 step process, but if it gets any more complicated than that, if you want to really connect the click points, it gets very, very difficult to do in Designer.
Okay, I think that's it for now. We have now all your questions collected. Got it, thank you. Yes, it's really great to see it. And I am also closing the poll now.
I also wanted to mention that the management of workflows is much, much more difficult in Designer. I think that the management aspects of this are, even without the designers, the management aspects are a huge plus for using the Datapolis process system. And I'm very happy to have been able to come and talk with you about it.
Okay, I'm very happy too. Now, thank you all for coming. Thank you very much, okay, for this inspiring presentation. Now, I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you have some more questions, just send it and we'll be happy to respond them. And as a reminder, we are organizing a second webinar this Thursday. It means tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. So if you feel you missed something today, you are more than welcome to join us tomorrow. And once more, it was a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you, have a nice day, and goodbye.